Well, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. For those who are currently locating in California, my name is Myvi Nguyen, and I'm with the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. We want to make sure that you're at the right place and space today. You are joining us as our bold conversations about equity. Um, and the session today is all about meeting our wonderful groups of authors who are using the tool of storytelling to share their personal stories and journeys in their own unique way. Thank you so much for joining us. This session is going to be recorded in case you cannot stay for the entire durations, but we do encourage you to because there will be a raffle of all the authors' books at the end. So let's get the party started. First of all, I would love to go through very quickly the Zoom etiquette that we are setting for today. We would love for you to stay muted unless it's called upon. There's going to be a Q&A session at the end where you can, unmute yourself if you feel comfortable to ask any questions, or if you wanted to, respond throughout the panel and throughout the sessions, please utilize the chat. We'd love to learn how you pronounce your name, and we would love to learn if you have any nickname. Go ahead and please update your name on the Zoom. And last but not least, we would love for you to put on speaker view, so then you'll be able to see all the panel all together. Actually, one more thing that I asked you to do, be present. The conversations today is really important for us at the foundation, and also for the authors, because this is the space where they get to share with you their own unique journey and story. So I would love to introduce to you Denise William, Chief Program Officer at Silicon Valley Education Foundation, to get tonight kickstarted.
Good evening, everyone. Denise Williams here, Chief Program Officer at the Foundation. So happy to have you all joining us, those for the first time, and a big shout out to those that are coming back and have been joining us maybe since we started in 2019. But anyway, thank you for being here. Next slide. So just a little bit about our foundation. It's the largest educational nonprofit in Silicon Valley. It's established legacy of providing proven STEM programs and being committed to empower students to graduate high school and be ready for careers and for college. And our vision is that every student becomes a successful and productive adult. And of course, the mission is that to deliver and advocate for STEM education that inspires students furthest from access and opportunity to succeed in college and career. So our initiative purpose is that we would like to confront issues of race and equity in the society and how it does impact education, and to ensure access and opportunity that leads to success for students of color. And of course, which we'll talk a little bit more at the end, of how we can continue to our obligation to respond to what is happening now. Because it's all well and good that we have these awesome conversations, but what are we doing when we leave this space, and how can we continue to make our work be sustainable? Next, please. And shift adult mindset and encourage courageous conversations. Sometimes the conversations are really tough, and sometimes it's very difficult to folks to really express themselves. But having this really safe space has been very helpful for a lot of our attendees. So we just welcome you and encourage you to share all of your ideas. Next. Just like to thank our sponsors, the Knight Foundation and the County of Santa Clara. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. And our 4 agreements of courageous conversations, we always just review these because we are definitely want to give credit to Glenn Singleton and Curtis Linton, but we'd like you to stay engaged, speak your truth with respect, experience discomfort. Sometimes it's very difficult to have these conversations, but that's okay because that is an equitable conversation at times. It's very difficult. And then expect and accept non-closure, because sometimes you'll be like, well, that's not answering my question, or I need a little bit more support with that one. It'll come or it may not, but we're always there for putting it in the chat or sending us an email so we can continue these conversations at other times. So thank you for addressing these agreements of courageous conversations. So what's going to happen today? Really excited. Oh, well, I'm always excited about these days, but excited again today. This is our 8th Bold Conversation since the launch in 2019. This last year, we had been exploring the principles and conditions from Glenn Singleton's Courageous Conversations book by embedding the conditions into our sessions. Those of you who had joined us throughout the years, we did Getting Up Close and Personal, Keeping the Spotlight on Race, Engaging Multiple Racial Perspectives. And today, our condition that we're going to be weaving in is keeping us all at the table. This is the ability to just talk about it together, and hear other folks talk about their experiences. An excerpt from a piece written by a sophomore in Chapel Hill, North Carolina says, let's do something. Not saying we're going to move the world, but we can provoke a shift in our minds, moving away from ignorance, discrimination, and the belief that we understand without experiencing it. So today we will be at the table with a diverse, amazing group of children's authors. They will be speaking their truth and sharing their stories through their experiences and literature. We will then go to breakout rooms with the authors. And then, of course, at closure, we will be reflective and we will think about our call to action and what they may look like. Next. So now I would like to introduce our moderator, and she's also one of the authors. She's just an amazing young lady. Let me get this. So her name is Colleen Thomas, and she is the author of Beautiful Skin, a children's book about overcoming racism. She was born and raised in the small town of Blackstone, Massachusetts. Her world was not diverse. When it came time to go to college, Colleen knew she wanted to leave her home and travel to a new part of the country. Clemson, South Carolina became her new home. She graduated with a degree in chemical engineering and still resides near Clemson today with her husband and 3 adorable children. Colleen currently works full-time as the Director of Strategic Impact for Silicon Valley Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Colleen Thomas.
Thank you so much, Denise, and thank you for the warm introduction. I just want to start by saying that I really am humbled to be sitting here today with our panel of just brilliant women. You're going to hear from 4 amazing authors. You're going to hear their stories. You're going to hear their stories which inspired them to write their children's books. And I'm just really excited about the conversation that we're going to have. So over 70% of children's books contain characters that are white, or animals, or objects. And so each of our panelists that you'll meet in just a few minutes, they've all played a role in increasing the diversity of characters and culture in literature, specifically children's literature. So I'll be facilitating our conversation today with these four amazing women. And I ask our guests here to please add, if you have any questions as we go, please add them to our chat. At the end of our panel discussion, we will leave some time for audience question and answers with our panelists. And we'll also have a breakout session where we can ask some more intimate or some more bold questions for our authors if need be. So we're now going to, I believe we can go to the next slide. And there we go. And we will now be introducing our authors one by one. Is Joanna with us yet? No.
Not yet.
Okay, so Joanna, who we'll introduce later, she is an assistant vice principal. And so as we know here at Silicon Valley Education Foundation, students take priority. So she's dealing with some student issues, but we hope that she can join us in just a little bit. So she's running late, but we are going to start with meeting Kirsten Liepmann. She is author of Little Book for Big Changes, Activities and Tips to Make the World a Better Place. She currently serves as the program manager for Intermediaries for Scale at Tides, a philanthropic partner and nonprofit accelerator dedicated to building a world of shared prosperity and social justice in San Francisco. Prior to that, Kirsten lived in Germany, Puerto Rico, Spain, Japan, and US is where she's all grown up. Today, she still loves to travel and explore different cultures. After earning a BA from Dartmouth College and a master's in education from Northwestern University, she taught elementary school for 7 years before obtaining her MBA from the University of Oxford. She believes that education and children are the key to positive change. Kirsten, it's wonderful to see you again, a former coworker of mine. And I remember 5 years ago, you just telling me about this idea you had in a book that was in the works. So I'm really excited to have you here today and to hear all about the successes of your book and to have you share them with all of our audience here today. So if you don't mind just starting us off, can you give us an overview for everyone to hear what your book is about?
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Colleen. And thanks to SVF for bringing me here. Yeah, this book has been a work in progress. And so happy that it's finally out in the world. Little Book for Big Changes, or we've actually recently been released in North America under the title 100 Ways to Make the World a Better Place, is really about empowering young people to make a positive difference in our world. So in the book, we explore 12 different global challenges, from poverty to climate change to diversity and justice. And the book contains some information, some guided activities, and suggestions for activities and ideas to explore further. A big piece of this book is about empowering kids, which we do by inspiring them to want to learn and do more. So we only scratch the surface of these challenges, since they are such large and complex challenges. But our goal is that it's enough of a sample to whet people's curiosity and passion, and that kids walk away understanding that one person can make a difference, but also that they're not alone, that we're stronger together. And I should say, I keep saying we because I cannot take full credit for this book. I have a co-author, Karen Ng, who has been on this full journey with me, and currently is in Australia, in Sydney, Australia. So she said she might try to tune in, but definitely know that this was a collaborative work.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. Looking forward to hear more. We're next going to introduce Wafa Shami. She is an author of her latest release, When Zatar Met Zait. She was born and raised in Ramallah, Palestine. She moved to the US to pursue higher education and graduated with a master's degree in international studies. Since moving to the US, Wafa has maintained her engagement in Middle Eastern issues as a volunteer. After her son was born, she was inspired to write her children's storybook based on her childhood memories. Her stories, Easter in Ramallah and Olive Harvest in Palestine, were published in the last 2 years. Besides being busy raising her son, Wafa, who lives in California, has a passion for cooking and writes a food blog. in which she shares her family's recipes. Wafa is also our program manager here at SBEF. Wafa, your stories are brilliant, and they do such a wonderful job highlighting your Palestinian culture and cuisine, and some that I've learned from. And so can you please share with us all a synopsis about maybe your most recent book or maybe a high overview of all three of your books that you've published?
Thank you for having me. I'm humbled and grateful to be part of this panel. And thank you so much for all the organizers, Colleen, V, Denise, Valeria, everybody who helped out in making this event happen. Basically, from what you said, like food and stories are intertwined in my culture, if I may say. Like food is a big deal, perhaps in my culture, and there's a lot of stories to tell. There's a lot of memories to go back to and share. So my first two books were kind of stems from my own childhood, as you said, and I felt like I wanted to share this with my son and the word. And the Zayt, when Zaatar met Zayt, basically stems from that idea of food and culture. And Zaatar basically is the herb thyme, which is hugely consumed in Palestine. And I'm not sure if anybody have tried it, but it's a spice that is kind of triggering. And if you try it, you kind of get hooked on it. And most of the kids really love it. And usually it's served with zayt. But in the story, I made those zaatar and zayt into characters. And zayt is basically olive oil, where Palestinians brag about having the best extra virgin olive oil, one of the best extra virgin olive oil in the Middle East. So, and the end of the story, I don't want to spoil the story, but it's a little educational of how this herb is critical and how it's basically maintain itself. Same thing with how the olive is pressed into olive oil, and how at the end they meet and they bring people together. So it talks about culture, love, friendship, food at the same time all together.
Thank you, Waf. And you said when you try zaatar, you get hooked. And I know I'm not pronouncing it, zaytar. Pronounce it for me one more time.
Yes.
Okay. And so I was actually traveling on vacation last week, and I was at a Moroccan restaurant, and I messaged Waf. I said, I'm trying it and it's so good. And she had to explain to me that Moroccan is very different than a Palestinian version. So next time I come out, Waf is going to have to make me some Palestinian version so I can taste the difference. But thank you for sharing about your stories, Wafa.
Thank you.
The next author that we have on our panel is Tam Lee. Tam has founded Tiny Wrist Company, which is now her books help children all over the world learn about Vietnamese culture. Tam searched for Vietnamese children's books to read to her child and was shocked at the lack of available materials. Additionally, the few books available for children ages 0 to 3 had been translated from English rather than originally written in Vietnamese. She started in 2020 during the pandemic with a Kickstarter, and for her first book, which was 10 nursery rhymes from Vietnam. She was overjoyed with the support from the community and has since added more books to the collection. They also venture out to making music on YouTube, creating a Facebook group for Vietnamese bilingual families, and many other projects. Their talented team is globally distributed with editors, musicians, and artists who love and care about Vietnam and their cultural heritage. Tam, thank you also for being with us today. You have a whole repertoire of books. So can you give us an overview about what some of the books in your collection are?
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. And I just changed my background to share with you. This is the cover of the first book that we produced, which was the 10 nursery rhyme. I also have it here, but I don't know whether it shows. No? I think, like you mentioned, I am a Vietnamese mom. I'm really proud of my heritage, and I want to share it with my kid. And it was just hard to find books like that on the market. And so the only way you can do that is you go to Vietnam, like buy a bunch of books and you ship it here. But if you don't speak Vietnamese, then how do you read them? How do you share it with people who don't speak Vietnamese? So I started with the first book, which was a collection of Vietnamese nursery rhymes. So these would be things that when you were little, your grandma would be singing to you. We just collected them and translated them into English with very cute illustration. So that's how we started. And after that, we started more with, okay, what else? What are the traditions? What are the holidays of Vietnam? Other cultural aspect of Vietnam that we can share with with more people. So we have a book about Lunar New Year, which just happened earlier this month. A lot of people, when you would hear the phrase Chinese New Year, but actually many different Asian countries are celebrated as well, Vietnam included. So we want to give a glance into how does Vietnamese celebrate Lunar New Year, and what do we call it? We call it Tết. So we have a book that is just about Lunar New Year, and then we have a book about a folklore character also for a holiday, which was the Mid-Autumn Festival, which happened in autumn when the moon is supposed to be the fullest of the year. And when you look at the moon, we have a folklore that has like, who is on the moon? Who lives there? How did they end up there? So it's a story that I retold from my perspective to make it more relatable and share it in bilingual context so that people can read it, especially in our families here in the US. Different generations speak different languages. So that is really our mission, to present something that the entire family can enjoy. The grandparents might be able to read the story in Vietnamese, and then the parents, the nannies, the teachers can read in English, and it's the same content. So in general, that's what we are trying to do, and we just think of ourselves as kind of like promoter of Vietnamese culture and language. We want to share more of that. So that's why you see like we are all over the place. We have books, we have music on YouTube. Please go on our YouTube channel and listen to them. That are also like very popular Vietnamese children's song. We have a Facebook group that is very global and have more than 1,000 people joining, with families that are bilingual Vietnamese or want to learn more about Vietnamese culture. So we just jump into any of these opportunities, myself included, and very happy to be here to share more about it. Just like, okay, can we share more about our culture? What else can we do? So that's where I am.
Thank you so much, Tam, for sharing all about your wonderful work that you're doing. The fourth author on our panel is Joanna Ho. Thank you for joining us. You made it just in time, Joanna. We explained that, students take priority. We understand that at SVEF. So we're glad that you were able to come here with us tonight. Joanna Ho is a New York Times bestselling author of Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. Her upcoming picture books include Playing at the Border, a story of Yo-Yo Ma, Eyes That Speak to the Stars, which I believe was just released, so she'll tell us more about that, and One Day. Her debut young author novel, The Silence That Binds Us, will be released in 2022. She's a writer and an educator with a passion for anti-bias, anti-racism, and equity work. She holds a bachelor's in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's from the Principal Leadership Institute at Berkeley. She's been an English teacher, a dean, the designer of an alternative to prison program, and a professional development creator partnering with educational leaders around the country. She's currently the vice principal of a high school here in the Bay Area. Joanna, welcome. I would love for you to, we know you've written several books and you have several in the works, your most popular book being Eyes That Kiss in the Corner. So can you give us a short overview of what that book is about and perhaps even an intro into your newest release?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. Eyes That Kiss in the Corners is the story of a young girl. A young Taiwanese girl who notices that her eyes are shaped differently than some of the people around her. And through the relationships that she has with her mom and her ama, her grandma, and her meme, her little sister, she really comes to recognize the beauty and power, not just in her eyes, but in all that her eyes represent. So her family and her history and her culture. And I think one of the main lines in that story is, my eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea are a revolution. And there are layers, I would say, in that story that really point at why we have one very narrow white standard of beauty, and recognizing that you are beautiful despite all the messages and the systems that have been built to tell you you're not, really as an act of revolution. So that's the first story. Eyes That Speak to the Stars is the companion story. It just came out on Tuesday, and it starts with a young boy who experiences some racial microaggressions at school. So a friend of his draws a picture with his two eyes like lines on his face, and he feels really upset about it. And so similarly, through the experiences and relationships he has with his dad and his akong, his grandpa, and his little brother, he also comes to realize his own power and his ability to create change. So it's sort of a connection from history and stories and family, but also, I think, a call to action for change for the future.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And as you can all see, audience, what a wonderful panel of amazing women and amazing authors that we have today. So it's just evident how passionate each one of you is about your work and about your story. So I myself, like Tam, found my passion to write, and like Wafa, I found my passion to write because of my own children. So if you asked me 2 years ago if I'd be an author, I never would have imagined it. Or if I'd be moderating a panel of these wonderful children's book authors, I would never have imagined. But like Tam, during the pandemic, I discovered a need that I couldn't fulfill off of Amazon. So in the height of the racial tensions going on in the world in the summer of 2020, I was really struggling to find a book that I could use as a mother to biracial children. So my two girls, and I have a little boy, are biracial, and I didn't know as a white woman how I can help educate and inform and raise my children. So there were no quite books that fit the mold. So I took it upon myself to write a poem. As my colleagues at SVF would know, I really enjoy poetry. So I wrote a poem, I shared it with my husband, and my husband told me, you have to publish that book and you have to share it with the world. And thus Beautiful Skin, my book was born. So within just a few short months, I had an illustrator and I published my book, and I've been able to share it internationally. So my kids, through this book, it takes a role of my daughter, a biracial daughter. She learns through microaggressions the words race, the words racism, and the word diversity. And so my kids were my why, and my kids really were my inspiration. So I would love to chat with all of our authors today to hear, what is your why? What was your inspiration? And at what point did you first discover that this is why I want to write a children's book? So let's start with Tam, since our stories seem to be quite similar. Tam, can you expand more about why you started your Kickstarter back in 2020?
Yes, for sure. Thanks for sharing your story, Colleen. I think I started from a very similar place. Just I was a first-time mom, and I was like, how difficult it is. I am Vietnamese. My kids will definitely like being Vietnamese and like know how to speak the language and appreciate all the things. And then I realized that they say it all the time, but not until I became a mom, I realized it's true. They said that it takes a village to raise children, and it's true. If it was just myself, just little things when I was growing up and was always there is not available. There's no like grandma or grandpa story time. When I was growing up, I was in the neighborhood. I could just like run to my neighbors. We have like neighbor games that was just folk games that passed to us from many generations ago. And that is definitely not something that is available in a city, in an apartment building and whatnot. So really for me, the inspiration for me is just really like, I want my kids to have something that they can relate to have something that is part of my culture and my heritage. And I don't want to force it on him. It's like, I'm Vietnamese, you have to be Vietnamese too. No, he can choose. He can choose to be whatever he wants, but I want him to have that exposure And the other thing is I heard a lot I immigrated to the US. So I grew up in Vietnam. I was born in Vietnam. I grew up in Vietnam. So I had that childhood. But a lot of my Vietnamese Americans friends were telling me that when they were growing up, their parents did not think that it was important to grow our Vietnamese traditions. And some of them were pushed to be, let's be more American. Let's don't speak Vietnamese at home so that your English can be better. So they thought that they would really appreciate having something like exposure to Vietnam, exposure to Vietnamese culture, and just having that as part of the tools in your identity that you can pull out. Like you don't always have to do that. You can be speaking English, you can be an American and appreciate American culture, but this is just like something that is part of your identity that you can refer to. So I just really am wanting to create that option, just like another option out there. Like you say, like it's not available on Amazon, it was not available anywhere. So I just want to try to see if I can do that. It was really scary because I'm like, maybe I'm a lunatic. I don't know. I don't know who else has this idea and whatnot. And I had only a small group of friends. So that's why I started with a Kickstarter. And for any of you who want to explore this, I think it's a great idea because you kind of like put out a project there, what do you want to do? And then people support you in that effort by like giving you funding. And then you, for example, in my case, was kind of like, if you give me funding, then you get the book when it become available. So that's how I get started. And I was actually very lucky and very touched to hear from all the other people of the Vietnamese community, not only in the US, but all over the world, from Australia, in the Netherlands, and a lot of other places. So really for me, that is the starting point. And then now I'm just thinking like, what else can we do? Like not only books, we can do music, we can do shows, we can do story time. So for me, it's just like, let's create that option so that it is there as an option. And I want to present it in a way that is, it's not like forcing like, hey, you have to do this. It's just like, it's another option. It looks pretty, it's engaging, it's cute, and let the kids choose. So that's where I come from.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tam. And saying it's scary, it is. And you took the risk. And all of us here today took that risk. And you produced such a gift, not only for your children, but a gift for other parents to share or other educators to share with their children as well. So thank you. Thank you for taking that risk. Now, Kirsten, you also, Tam mentioned about how she used a Kickstarter to jump her inspiration. And so I know you did as well. And you even pay tribute to the Kickstarters in one of your cover pages. But also one message that I found in your book that said, small changes happen with one person can grow into bigger changes with a lot of people. And I can read the quote right. So what was the moment that inspired you to start your Kickstarter to write your book?
Yeah. As Tam was sharing that, it's like, oh, similar experience there with Kickstarter. And that's the path that we started on and have been just amazed how this has grown since then. But yeah, what really inspired this, I mentioned my co-author, this really did start from a friendship and a shared passion around a desire to make the world a better place. And my co-author and I were discussing one day how we felt like people were unaware or felt removed or relied on governments to solve and fix these big global challenges. But we were convinced that everyone has a role in solving these. They're complex, they're global. There's not going to be one person, one entity that's going to fix this. But we also realize that sometimes we feel powerless and we don't know where to start. And that some people are not included in these conversations or in these discussions. And one group of people that we sort of zoomed in on was children, where we think children really do have so much power. They're innovative, they're clever, energized, but I think often unrecognized and often kind of put into this place where we think kids won't understand, or this isn't something that kids should care about. But Karen and I were convinced otherwise, and we started to toss around ideas on how we can both inform children, but also empower them. And we went through a bunch of options. We thought of craft kits and websites and more of a narrative type of story, but we really landed on an activity book as something that we thought could set children up for action, something that they could bring with them into the world around them, mark up, make their own, and something that they can share with others. So our book really incorporates opportunities to have adults engage with them, have them work with peers and friends to take on some different activities and challenges. So we hope that it helps kids feel a sense of ownership and confidence, and gives them that boost to go out and take some action and find friends along the way that will work with them.
Thank you, Kirsten. Now, Wafa, the same question for you. I know your son plays a big role in everything you do in life, but what was that one moment that really inspired you that you said, I'm going to write a book?
Well, I think I want to take it a little bit back to since when I immigrated to the US. So when I first landed to the US, being a Palestinian and lived my entire basically life under occupation, I felt like I'm on a mission to educate at least Americans of what the reality of the matter is. Like, people don't hear the real stories, and mainstream media does not provide adequate and correct information of what really goes on. So part of my personal mission was to become an activist and talk more about the reality on the ground. And that stems later on to how I was inspired. Yes, definitely my having my son inspire me to write a story and to share with him a bit of my culture and my growing up, since I know that he will grow up here in the US and he's not going to have that opportunity to experience what I've experienced as a child. But also I felt it's important to connect to kids here in the US. And as you shared, Colleen, like, I wouldn't be able to find any stories that talk about my own culture or any other culture. So I felt it's very helpful to start with the kids at a young age and to inform, to bridge that gap, to make that connection, to share with the kids the things that they know about. Like when I shared in my story, Easter in Ramallah, what do we do during Easter? How do we celebrate Easter? We basically, I as a child was excited to color eggs and make cookies and, you know, special Palestinian cookies, whatever they are, but it's basically sharing the same things as an average American or any kid in different parts of the world do during Easter. So I thought this is just a way to inform and bridge the gap again, and have this kind of connection built between children in the US, in the world, connected to what is it like to grow up in Palestine.
Thank you, Wafa. So back to Joanna. In your book, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, your story, as you mentioned, walks us through a relationship within a family, through a daughter, a mom, a grandmother, and a sister. So like the other authors, did family play a role in your inspiration? And if not, what inspired you?
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's always easiest to start back at the reason I became an educator, because for me, so much of all that I do is really wrapped up in the same reason. So I became really passionate about anti-racism and equity work as a high schooler. And that's the reason I became an educator. I became an educator because the system of education is incredibly oppressive and systemically oppressive and racist, and does not provide equitable opportunities for all students. As I think most people who are educators are aware, and particularly in the pandemic has been made more clear than ever. And I came in education wanting to like dismantle the whole system, to start over, to blow it up, because I don't think that's changed, actually, truthfully. I still think that, like, I don't know that you can revise and make incremental change in a system that was set up to oppress and to perpetuate the status quo. So that sort of background to like understand maybe the core of my passions. And the reason I became a children's book author is, of course, tied to my kids, but it is 100% tied to my desire to continue to work towards justice and liberation for all people. I really do. I was an English teacher, and I believe really strongly in the power of stories and the power of books and the importance of representation. And so that's what I would strive to do as an English teacher, before I became an administrator. And side note, I'm really sorry if I'm off here talking. I'm still at work. I had my first child about 7 years ago, and I was looking for inclusive picture books for him. And I couldn't find very many books about young Asian boys, like almost nothing. And it's possible that it was because I'm not very good at Google searching, but it's also factually true that, there are more books about animals than there are about all Black, Indigenous, people of color combined. I'll say that, more about animals than all Black, Indigenous, people of color combined in the children's book industry. So I didn't know the statistics at the time, but I had this like epiphany of, you could write a book for kids. And truthfully, I think that was born from like universal heavenly inspiration, and also a little bit of just probably ignorance and stupidity, because I thought, a picture book's like 400 words. Anybody could do that. But the truth is, I wrote some really, really bad books, and I showed them to somebody who had a very small publishing company, and she was like, you should study the craft and you should maybe learn a little bit more. So I did, but the inspiration has always been to hopefully add my voice to hopefully something that will become a canon of increasingly inclusive voices telling stories for children, because I don't want to live in a world where I am invisible and my kids are invisible. And I also don't want to live in a world where other people are telling our stories, because it doesn't matter how much research you do, you don't know what it's like to live and grow up and breathe the way that we do.
Wonderful. You're all inspirational to me. And I believe our audience would say the same, just hearing you and hearing your passion. Just thank you all for putting yourselves out there, and for, as I said with Tam, taking that risk, because all of your stories are beautiful, and all of your stories are powerful, and all of your stories are making an impact. So thank you. I'm going to go back to Kirsten. In your book, one of the first pages, there's a welcome page, and there's an image of two children. One appears to be white and the other has brown skin. So they're both holding hands with the earth. And your message in a lot of your book is how we're all part of this world, how we're all in this together, and how we can all make a difference. So what is one of the biggest takeaways that you want children to have from your activity book? And also, what's one of the biggest takeaways that you'd want their parents to have?
That's a good question. I think a lot about this book is to make sure that kids feel that sense of belonging in their communities, but also just to the world big picture, where they should feel ownership over what's going on in the world, responsibility, but also take pride in it, and feel that they can help shape the world into what it should be. Because I think we can all agree there are definitely areas for improvement, many areas for improvement, but that we want to make sure that all kids, doesn't matter geographically where they're from, doesn't matter what race or ethnicity or age or family background that they come from, but that they are part of this world, and that they, because of that, they get to shape this world. And so that's one thing that we're hoping that the message gets across, and that they convey to those around them. And we want, I think the second part of your question was adults. So what should they take away? We want them to put more trust into the children. Let them explore, question with them. I think a big piece that this book is really designed around is learn with your children. And whether it's as a parent, as a grandparent, as a caregiver, as just a trusted adult in their life, really letting them kind of be in that exploratory mode, and hold back from thinking that you have the answers, because yeah, I would say most of us probably don't. And it's just this process where we need to learn and explore and take risks and fail, but we do it together, and that's where progress comes from.
Thank you. I like that, putting trust in children. And that's something that I think many of us don't do enough of, including myself with my own children, right? We don't realize how powerful and how capable and how smart that kids are, and how they absorb everything around them, right? Everything they see, everything they hear. So again, why it's so important that they're seeing these stories, they're seeing these pictures of themselves in books, because it really is important, because that also empowers them. Thank you, Kirsten. Joanna, a growing number of students are demanding faculty accountability on issues of race and equity in schools. You know this, you're vice principal. So as a vice principal, how has that impacted you? And how have you responded?
I feel like it's a beautiful thing to have students, and I think staff also, I mean, really pushing and having an increased awareness and a critical consciousness. I think it really resonates with some of the other speakers have already shared about trusting students. I mean, young people, I work with high school students, but I think young people today are so much more aware, and they have so much more language to speak on the things that they see, certainly more than I was in high school, though maybe that's not like such a great comparison, but they're so wise, and they see, and they're critical. And so, yeah, I mean, I got students in my office like, hey, why is the N-word being used in our school? Like, what are we doing about it? What are you doing about it? Like, why is this still a thing that's happening here? We have people talking about inclusive books. It's not just curricular in books, it's all of the ways that our practice needs to be pushed to make sure that we're creating safe and empowering spaces for all of our students. So truthfully, I think as an educator, I think my goal is always to encourage that, and to continue to listen to student voices, and to push and to try to push my teachers, but also myself, to continually grow, to have hard conversations, to have to do that reflection, and then to talk to each other, and to go beyond like racism 101, and then go beyond like people need to be held accountable into a space of like, how are we holding each other accountable, and how are we building the trust to have those conversations together? Because what I realize is like the sound bites you see online, they sound really powerful, and they sound really beautiful, but the messiness of the work it's really messy, and it's really hard. And so I think to your question, like sometimes I sit in a panel like this and I'm like, well, I know what the right answers are, but it's messy, and I feel like I'm messing up all the time. I know I'm messing up all the time. There are so many ways that like that all that you want to honor all the different voices, and it's hard. It's hard. I don't even know how to explain it beyond that, but I hope that like my role as an educator is to always try and to like know that I'm messing up and try to work through that and learn, and then to honor those student voices and to encourage them to give them that space and that power to demand the changes that they need and that they deserve in my school specifically, but in the school system in general.
Awesome. What a beautiful message. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right, this work is hard. It is messy. There's no, right answer. There's because it's messy, and you're right. And sometimes that's the only way to articulate it. But just by being here, the audience members, by being here and listening, you all for being here and sharing your stories, hearing your voices, and, going back to that empowering and putting trust in our kids and hearing their voices and their stories, and realizing that we're all human. We do mess up when we do make mistakes, but realizing that we're all human, and somebody who doesn't look like us or from a different culture, or from a different country or a different religion, or they're human. Right. And so that's at the core. What I hear all of your stories are saying is we're all human, and we're all valued, and we're all worthy, right? We're all worthy, and your voice is important. So thank you, Joanna, for sharing. Tam, my next question is for you. What barriers, we know there's many, what barriers do you hope to break down or overcome in your work and in your stories that you've been sharing?
Oh gosh, I very much relate with what Joanne was sharing earlier, of like, at first you may just have an idea for a book and you think like, oh, how hard can it be? I can just like write a children's book, like it's mostly pictures, right? So I just want to share first that like, I want us to, and I also relate to what Joanne was saying of us should be telling our story, because it's our story and we should represent that and share that story. And so I'm just thinking that there is just the confidence barrier, both as a writer and both as an author, and just as someone, I don't know if everyone feels this, but for myself, it's just like the right to be represented, the right to tell your story. I just hope to just like, I can do it so that other people can do it as well. That you may not have seen your story, you may not have seen people like you being represented everywhere, and don't take it on yourself of like, oh, I'm not worthy of representing, I'm not worthy of being in books or anything. But have that confidence to say, why is that the case? Like, why am I not presented? Why people like me are not in media? And just have that confidence to explore it and say, yeah, our story should be told, and it should be told by people like us who experience it ourselves. So really for me, that's where I think that and I know it's hard because when I started it, I was just like, it's just like awareness. Like, do you even aware? Because when I was younger and did not have children, I was not even aware of that. I was just like, I was in bookstores all the time, and I never noticed that there were not enough books for diverse characters and people who are not white and have a typical background. But I didn't notice it at all. So it's just like, just having that awareness there, and bring that awareness, because now we are another voice, we are another book there, and they're like, oh, interesting. And then having that confidence to say that, okay, maybe there's a gap here, and you can do it. You can raise that voice, you can own that voice, and own it for yourself.
Wonderful, great message, Tam. Wafa, you said in your bio that you continue to stay engaged in work around Middle Eastern issues, and that's something that's very important to you. What do you see as some of the most significant challenges in work around diversity and inclusion? And how do you think your book assists in addressing some of those challenges?
I think a lot of people are misinformed. They don't really know, like Middle East in general. have this taboo that people don't know a lot about things in the Middle East. When I first immigrated and, going to college and all that, or to grad school, and I was in North Carolina, which is less diverse than California. So I was asked all kinds of awkward questions that, showed me how misinformed people were. Because again, the mainstream media does not present the entire story, and the images that people see on the media of aggressive, angry Arabs, that I even was asked once a question, do Arabs have tails? And I'm like, oh my God, this is just so awkward. Do all Arabs live in tents? And this is probably was a while ago, and things have changed quite a bit since I've moved. But I still feel sharing that information helps in breaking that taboo, especially at a young age, when a younger child in school has a classmate who comes from a different background, and there's a story that somebody shared, or they read a story about that particular area. So it just opens a new sphere, a new level of education, and that story is gonna be carried with this child along their lives, and especially if they have the opportunity to experience somebody from that region. So I wanted my child to feel comfortable sharing where I'm from, where I come from, what it's like to be a Palestinian, what it's like to have a sandwich that has za'atar and zait in it, that is all smelling, and the kids are just gonna look at him and he's gonna feel like, he's not gonna feel awkward. He's gonna be happy and proud to share that part of food, or to share what its food is, or what is this food, where it comes from. This food has a story. It is important to my, my mother's culture, where she comes from. So I think it helps to have that information available. It helps in breaking that gap, bringing people together. And I feel people are very similar in so many ways and in so many levels, but you need to kind of know how to make that connections. And at the same time, it's beautiful to be different. It's beautiful to have that diversity, because if we all look the same, how boring that word is going to be, versus everybody has something unique to provide, which makes the word a beautiful potluck.
So true, so true. And even just looking at all of the faces on our Zoom today, just how different everybody is. And that's what makes it beautiful. And just looking at just the five of us here, how all of our stories are unique, yet so similar. The message is all so similar. And so to be able to share that, and to be able to really accept, and, a sandwich that looks different or smells different, as Wafa said, to be able to, it all takes with learning and listening, and to wanting to learn and listen. And so something that all of our books do is trying to encourage children to want to learn, and to want to explore people that might be different than them. So thank you, Wafa, for sharing. Kirsten, I'm going to ask you the same question. So again, what do you see are some of the most significant challenges in work around diversity and inclusion? And how does your activity book address some of those?
I think the biggest challenge is that, like, in all the spaces that I've been working in so far, so back when I was still teaching, to time being at SVF, to the current work I'm doing, which is more with colleges and universities and the post-secondary level. I think the challenge is that we're all still figuring it out, but people want answers. Like there's this impatience of like, we need to act, we want change. There's the hesitation from people who don't know. And I think there's also hesitation in terms of like, people just don't know where to start. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge I've been seeing, is just breaking through, being ready and comfortable to have, I think Joanna talked about them, like those tough conversations, a lot of the self-reflection. And so I think there's just this uncertainty in terms of like, how can we actually move forward? And I think I think the impatience is perfectly, makes total sense. I mean, we've been facing these inequities for a long time. The education system has been built upon inequities. And now is the time that we have to do the work. And the work is going to look different for everyone, which is why we don't have like everyone, every institution, every organization, which is why, yeah, there isn't the answer waiting for us, to just waiting for us for it to appear. But yeah, I think that's what I've been seeing as the toughest piece.
And I think you can see my notebook here, because that really well feeds into our next question, is because everybody does the work differently. And so before we open it up to questions from the audience, so please, audience, feel free to enter some questions in the chat. I wanted to open up to the floor of our panelists, to the four of you here. Not everybody is an author, right? Not everybody has the skills that you all were blessed with to write and publish children's books or novels. So what message can you give to the audience here today who shares the same passion, who shares the same desired results in really bringing diversity and highlighting the diversity and the goodness? What advice could you give to the audience and how they can make a difference in their roles? And I'll open up to any one of you. I didn't call on it. Maybe I should. Tam, what do you think? What are some of the ways that people can get involved, that people can really help make a difference, other than coming to a panel or writing a children's book? Or what are some risks that you think that they can take, or steps that you would advise?
I think it's a really good question, and I don't think I have the answer. I can just always share from my own experience before I wrote the book, which I think I have to say that it's scary to do that, to be honest, because there's still hostility surrounding certain issues, and people may not be on the same page on certain things. So when you are sharing a piece of yourself or your own opinion, it is scary, because it's not always, you don't always feel like this is a safe environment to do that. So I just want to acknowledge that. So I think maybe the first one that was for myself is just like, validate your feeling of if you feel uncomfortable with some issues, and that may not the majority view out there, that might not be in media, that might not be in the community that you are in, but it's your feeling. So validate that and know that is a valid feeling, because you own your emotion and your reaction. And then start with what you are comfortable with. Like, are you comfortable sharing that with even your small group of friends, your coworkers? Are you comfortable sharing a different perspective? And it can start small, just like maybe there's a panel about for my examples, like Asian in America at work, that they're looking for people just to share, like, what is your experience? Did you experience any discrimination or anything like that? So just raise that perspective and what you experience yourself. And yeah, I think that's where I started, just like, where are you comfortable with, and just knowing that it takes a lot of courage, and be ready for that. Like, start small whenever you feel ready with your own group of people.
Yes, really, really good point is I like how you said start small. And that's one of Kirsten's message in her book, right? You just start small, and all it needs is a little ripple. And you can really have a big impact on just by focusing on yourself, and by focusing on the direct people around you, right? Your family, your friends. I know when everything was going on in 2020 and you know, racial tensions were at its highest, one of my husband's friends had called him, and my husband is Black and his friend was white, and he called him and he said, "What can I do? You know, you know, what can I do? How can I?" And I remember the conversation, and he said, "You know, you can impact yourself. That's what you can control. So you be the model, and you know, validate your own feelings, right? But you really take care of yourself and your home and your friends, and you don't have to publish a children's book that, you know, can be sold internationally. Yes, amazing work, but not everybody can do that or take that risk. But you can affect you, and you can affect your friends and your family, and you set that example there, and that little ripple will eventually get bigger and bigger. So really, really good point, Tam. It was a tough question, so really good point. Wafa, I'm going to ask you the same question. So how do you think others here in the audience can really help make an impact on some of this work? What are some advice or some things that you think they can do?
I think if somebody has an inspiration or an idea to write a story, I would say go for it, dig in and try to make it happen. Don't let the idea of publishing a story scare you or turn you off. And if you don't, I think changing the word starts from home. So if you really want to change the word, so start from where you are, make peace with it, share those kind of stories about diversity, about different communities with your own children, teach them empathy, not just necessarily tolerance, teach them to understand and connect with others, learn about others, be open and acceptable to others' differences, other people's differences, other people's cultures, diversity, and accepting. And the other thing, if you don't have children, you may have relatives who has children, nieces, nephews, friends who has kids that you can probably give them such stories and open their minds about what's going on in different parts of the world. And if you'd like to go that extra step, you can donate that book probably to your child's school, for instance, and expand your network and expand your information to reach out a bigger audience. Because as you know, I'm a self-published, I'm not sure about everybody here in the panel, but I am a self-published author, meaning I have really to reach out and inform people how to get my book and how to reach my book versus the books that are available in the library and what schools have in their library. So my book wouldn't reach the public library or wouldn't reach the school library. So that's why I encourage everybody to inform the schools, or maybe ask the schools, or put pressure on the schools and the library probably to bring more diverse stories to their classroom.
Wonderful. And I saw somebody in the chat said, what a great idea, Wafa. Christiane, what a great idea in donating your books, small steps, because often, as you said, it's important to learn, but people don't often just go to the bookstore and say, hey, I want to learn about people from Palestine and Palestinian culture, right? But by putting those books in their hands and by donating, you're opening those doors and allowing them to open their eyes to see, oh, wow, you know, there's other books out there. There's other cultures, there's other people that are so much like myself as a human, right? So really good idea donating that book. Joanna, this will be the last question for you, but same question. So as a teacher, I know you see, or as a principal, you see a lot of this and a lot of people wanting to make change, especially in your students and some of the stories you shared, which is so exciting and awesome. So how would you, what advice would you give to our audience here listening in about what work they can do and what are some of the small steps that they can take?
I love this question. I think my question back to you is, are you talking about change in stories, change in increase in representation, change in taking down the education system and building it better. But I think the answer is really anything, you know. One way, I would also agree, like if you have a story and you want to tell it and you don't think you're a writer, but you think you have a story, like you probably are a writer and you should probably try to do the thing. You know, if you've been thinking about it and you're just not sure, I would just say, like, do the thing that you feel inspired about. Like fear is not a reason to like stop you, or maybe fear at the journey or fear about the process or how long it could take. Like, I just think the world needs your stories and you're the best person to tell them. So that's one thing. In terms of like supporting and increasing diversity, I just think that everybody has gifts. Like we all have gifts and ways that we contribute. Like I'll be very, like for me, I am really visionary. I'm a big picture thinker. I spent this whole day looking for my keys. I don't know where they are. Like I'm not a detail person. And I need people around me who help me, who keep me straight, you know, and if it's not like keys, it's like, hey, don't forget you have that meeting, or hey, don't forget you have to do that little tiny thing that your brain forgot to do. And so it's like we need all the gifts to do all of the work, because it's so vast. So I think the other suggestion would just be to like recognize and honor the gifts that you have, and know that you've been given those gifts for a reason, and those gifts are things that you can use to facilitate change. And then the other thing is just in terms of supporting inclusive books and literature. If you're not writing your own, there's still so much you can do. I mean, one is publishing is a business, as much as we would talk about it in big terms. Like people will publish more books if the books with inclusive characters are purchased. So buy them if you have the means, use them as gifts. If you can't, borrow them from the library. Publishers look at those numbers too. If books are being checked out or from the library, that says something to the school and library market. If you're like, I don't do either of those, but I read them, you can leave reviews, you know, online on Goodreads. Those things make a huge difference if you share with your friends. So just from a strictly storytelling and books, and this is mostly for traditional books, but traditionally published books, which is the experience I can speak from. Those are things that are all really impactful, and publishers are watching. I mean, it's numbers, sadly, you know, it's like many other things. Even though we come from a really inspired place, it's still part of an industry. And so to change the industry, oftentimes it's the numbers that also speak. I know that's not a super inspiring answer, but that's also part of the truth of filling our world with more stories.
It is. And I thank you for sharing that perspective and that answer that you shared. So I appreciate it. I will say our time is nearing its end for this portion of the evening. So Joanna, I do want to say thank you to you for being here. Joanna can't be with us for the second portion, but thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for taking the risk and for publishing such beautiful, beautiful work. It truly, truly is. It is beautiful work. And good luck on your new release that just released 2 days ago. So thank you for joining with us, and thank you for everything that you're doing and continuing to do. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I can stay a little bit longer, and thank you all for the work that you're doing and for having me here today.
Yes. So now we're going to open up for the next about 10-15 minutes or so. We're going to open up the chat to see, and I see some messages coming in. If there's any questions from the audience that you would like to ask any of our panelists specifically or in general, so we'll do that for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So let me just kind of skim through the chat here. Lots of good ones. So one question, are the books available online? I will have all the authors in a minute put their links into the chat. So when we're done this portion, before we go to the breakout rooms, they're all coming in. So the chat keeps moving on me. Okay, I like this one. What was one of the most, I'm gonna change it. This one. How do you feel when someone misunderstood or disagreed with the message in your book? So has that happened? So the question that V must have gotten a private message from says, how do you feel if someone misunderstood or disagreed with the message in your book? And I'll let you all think. And while you think, I will share that was one thing that I was really scared about in publishing my book. I'm a white
Jump
mom.
in.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you, Colleen, if you're still going.
Well, I was just going to do really quick is being a white mom. That was one of my biggest fears in publishing a book about biracial children, is if I would be misunderstood or misrepresented. And it was one of my fears and something that I spoke to many people about. And I was told, but no, you are a mom with your own story, your own testimony, and is your own experience. And so use that as your inspiration, which is what I did. But it was something that I realized that I might have to deal with some negativity. And there was, some spam type negativity, but it wasn't coming from anyone who was worth listening to, if that makes sense. So that was my own understanding, but Joanna, go ahead.
Sure. I have a few experiences I can talk about. So there, before the publication of Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, there were some trailers and things that were released. And I can think of because I was like really traumatized by it at the time. There was somebody who made a TikTok who just like she took the passages. This is a month before the book was even released. So she hadn't even read the book yet. And just was like, basically, it was an Asian woman on TikTok saying, look, the white people got eyes that like sapphire lagoons and like ball grounds and lace trim, and we got tea and they kiss in the corner. She was like, I think the whites won this one. I was like, like, also you never read the book. And also like, maybe if you read the book, I was feeling all defensive, like, all of those lacy things are referring to Disney movies because they set the standard for beauty and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm in my head, but it hurts to feel so misunderstood, especially when someone has not even read the book at all. I think I carried that with me for a while. I think the flip of now I can laugh about it, but the flip is like, there's also feedback that's real. And so that's something that's scary, is knowing like, I'm not going to tell the stories of my novel. It has a young Asian girl whose brother experiences, brother died by suicide, and she has a best friend who is Black. And so she goes through this journey of healing. And she also comes to recognize her own blind spots and her ignorance in relation to her Black friends. And as she's on this journey of racial awareness, and I'm really nervous for that to come out. It's coming out in June because I'm sure I made missteps, and I have to listen when people say those things. Then the flip of that. So I feel like one is sometimes you just gotta like brush it off. The second one is you also have to listen. And I think that that's on your heart to know who you're listening to and who you can brush off. Typically, I feel like I'll listen to people who I have relationships with. If you're a random person online who doesn't know me or my work, then maybe that's a little easier to brush off. Or if you've never read my book, maybe I won't listen to you so much. The third part, though, is related. There were some comments from some people, most of whom were white moms of adopted children, saying, I thought I was going to love this book, but like, this doesn't match my family because my kids' eyes don't match mine. And it was sort of written from this way that was like, well, like it felt a little bit like you're centering yourself. But I can tell you, like, what grew from that is the third Eyes book, is a book about a young transracial adoptee who is from Korea who got adopted into a family. Because I think what we also realize is there is a dearth of stories about this particular experience if I center the child, not if I center the white mom who wants to be centered in the story, but if I center the child, there is a story here for people. And I wrote that with Liz Kleinrock. If you follow anyone, Teach and Transform, she's like a brilliant educator who's also an adoptee. And because that's not my story to tell, so we wrote that together. But I feel like there's three things. One is you brush it off. Two is you learn from it. And three is you turn it into an opportunity and make more.
Thank you for sharing those experiences. It's tough to face some of that and to listen to some of that. And sometimes you just want to just scream but you don't, but how you handle it and how you move forward, it's important, but it's tough to do sometimes. Anybody else want to respond to that before the next question? Any other experience?
I just want to add one piece that Joanne just said that I relate to, which is like sometimes you need to listen, and it's really hard. And in our case, because of many political events that has happened in Vietnam, you know, the Vietnamese American experience are really diverse. It's not everyone. I'm not representing everyone who is Vietnamese American, or the childhood experience that I had is not representing everyone. And so there are issues that are sensitive for certain groups that I might not realize. And when it brought back to me, I got really horrified. Like one example is, you know, the flag of Vietnam, the official country right now in Vietnam, might be offensive to a lot of people because that may represent an oppressive regime for a lot of people who have to flee and face a lot of hardship just to escape. So, like I say, it was not the personal experience that I had. So like sometimes when we just want to say like, it's available in Vietnamese and English, and we use the Vietnamese flag, not knowing that, a lot of people got back to us and like just said that is something triggering for them, and that is a learning moment for me, that like there is that moment. So so I just wanted to share that there's a lot of growth that I learned as well from the feedback.
Thank you, Tam. Thank you for
May I just
sharing.
add, I mean,
Yeah.
just briefly, it can be a conversation opener. If somebody says, I disagree with your message or your point, instead of going into the defense, I think it can just open the door to hear what other side's perspective is, and they may be misinformed, or they may have information they'd like to share. So it can, again, it can be just a way to educate others to take that extra mile.
Thank you, Wafa. The last question before we jump into the breakout rooms. Are there any other children's books that celebrate diversity and inclusivity from other readers that you, outside of your own, that you might recommend, and what are they? And a one that I would name, another student at Clemson who I graduated with, he just published his book 2 days ago, and it's called Nigel and the Moon. It's out now. It's about a young boy who grew up in Charleston who had dreams, but he only told them to the moon. I haven't read it. I did order it. It was just released. I'm looking forward to it, but it looks like a beautiful representation with a great and powerful message. So Nigel and the Moon, that's one I would recommend. Any others, Wafa, Kirsten, or Tam, that you would recommend?
I have one which has been on my shelf and I've been meaning to pick up because I don't have children, but I still love children's literature and youth literature. So this one's probably upper elementary or middle school, but it's called Dumpling Days. And I think it just kind of explores a young girl's exploration of her identity and culture as she tries to kind of navigate, which I think we all remember kind of that age, how there's just so many questions and confusing. So that's, again, I haven't read it yet, so it's like a half recommendation there.
Yeah, I can add a book that kind of caught my attention. It's called Black is the Rainbow Color, and it highlights Black people. And you know, it's interesting that goes into this mother who's talking to their children, and the child said, "Mama, I don't look Black. I look more brown." And it talks a little bit more Black is probably more a culture versus just skin tone. And yeah, it's a very interesting book.
And for me, I just want to add a really pretty picture book that I really enjoy. It talks about the refugee experience, but in a very poetic way. It's called Wishes, and it's just like so poetic, and you would not even realize it's talking about that until the end. So I just really like that one.
Thank you all for sharing. I did list those titles in the chat for anybody who wants to write those down. And at this time, I'll ask the authors if you want to put a link to where everybody here in the audience can purchase your book. You can just put that in the chat as well. So you can all enter those. So this is going to wrap up the portion of our panelist discussion. So let me see where we're at. So we are now going to go into 2 breakout rooms. So there'll be 2 authors in each breakout room. Oh, you just stopped the screen sharing it. My screen went back. My screen went black. So I got nervous that I got kicked off here. So we're going to go into the 2 breakout rooms. So this is some time that you could ask some, more bold questions or some more intimate questions that you want to ask with some of the authors. And we'll be in these breakout rooms for about 10-15 minutes before coming back to the main session, where we'll be raffling off some books and we'll leave with a call to action. So Valeria will send us off.
Well, thank you everybody for staying until now. The breakout room was only an opportunity for those who want that direct conversations. I know in my breakout room with Wafa and Tam, some of the questions were not answered yet, but please feel free to utilize the chat, in case you still want your questions to be asked. And of course, the panel probably going to get to you while we continue the show tonight. As mentioned at the beginning of today's sessions, we always close with the challenge to action. And I would love to bring you back our own Denise Williams, who's going to do that.
Thank you, V. And thank you to the ladies and moderator, who is also on the panel, for an absolutely excellent evening, sharing those stories, being so vulnerable in a lot of your responses, and really sharing a part of your life with us. Really appreciate it. So we always try to have a challenge to action at the end of our sessions. And as you can see on the screen, those beautiful books are there, and some lucky folk will get to actually win some of these books at the end. One thing you could do is try to write and tell your own story and think about what your book would be called. But what I would like to say is that it's so important to actually read these stories to our little ones and start to have these conversations at younger ages. Creating a safe and empowering space, just reiterate some of the examples and things that the ladies were saying, and have students actually having a sense of belonging when they are hearing these stories, and they feel more comfortable and they get to understand the other cultures also as they go through their journey. And someone said young people have more language, and it's important to have student voice. That's very important. And the power of these stories, and starting with students at a young age. Joanna, who had to leave, she had mentioned her interest in anti-racism as a high schooler and wanting to dismantle the system. So we know that some of our students have a lot of these emotions and powerful images in their head and really need to share their voice and talk about it. So if you are in that position where you can either have some kind of conversation or read stories to help bring out these conversations, if you're an educator in school, try it and see how it happens and how it starts to evolve. And if you're a parent, well, that's another great way also. So that's one of the challenges. I got a couple things for you this evening. Next slide, please. We are going to have another challenge for you, just to bring 5 more people to our next event. It is going to be coming up in May. It's the last one of the year. And we're so excited about this one also. We would like to really kind of get our numbers up, because it's going to be a great opportunity to hear Dante Stewart, who's the author of Shouting in the Fire. And we will be actually highlighting our 5th condition then, which is Let's Talk About Whiteness. So it'll be a very interesting conversation, and also a one that you will want to share your thoughts. You may have some, it may be a harder conversation than tonight's for sure, but please, you can go on and sign up for it right now so that you can make sure you have a place in that one. And there will also be an opportunity for some folk to get his book, Shouting in the Fire, talking about an amazing story and a storyteller, and who has gone through so many different aspects in his life with about getting angry and rage, and you know how he's experienced it like through high school and through his later years in education and in his journey. So you don't want to miss that one. So bring in 5 more folk and let's pack the house so we can hear more perspectives. And my last thing before you go to the before we go to the wheel and before we do the survey is one of the things that I mentioned earlier is one of the purposes of this initiative is to respond to what is happening in different aspects of our lives, maybe in education, just in the world, in the big scheme of things. So I would like to offer an opportunity for anyone who wants to join a focus group entitled Going Beyond the Conversation. We have been in these conversations for 2 years. And there's folk that ask me, okay, what are some big changes that have been made besides having a space, a safe space to talk? What things can we actually say that we've done in what areas? So if you are interested in going beyond the conversation and talking about how we can start to do some next steps and really create some big differences possibly, you know, and maybe starting to have the conversation about how we do that. But I think some say it's time for action too. We always challenge ourselves, but how about really stepping out and saying, okay, let's make this happen. So if you're interested, please put your interest in the survey, and we'd really appreciate that. We'll connect with you and start to form and have some really deeper conversations around going beyond the conversation. So really excited about that opportunity. So if you're interested, please reach out. All right. And again, thank you all for coming, and good luck in winning some of these awesome books.
Thank you so much, Denise. So my partner Valeria has put in the survey in the chat. So please help us very quickly take the survey. We take every feedback very seriously. We want to be able to make the engagement and the sessions much better every single time, and also utilize the survey comments box to let us know if you're interested in participating in this focus group that Denise was talking about. So we're gonna give you like literally 2 minutes until 6:25, and then we PM, and then we're going to run the official raffle for all the personally signed books of all the authors today. So let's take the next 2 minutes or so to do that. You do need to be here to be present to claim the book. So again, if you join us late, earlier there was a link, and I think Valeria, can you drop the link down for people to sign in to enter it in the raffle? Now is still a time because you officially stayed until the end, and wish you the best of luck. We thank you for staying until now. Once again, there's always more opportunity to win more books, because at the end of every of our bold conversation sessions, we always give out raffles. So make sure you sign up for the next one in May 12th. Other than that, we wish you a great evening if you're still in California time or somewhere in the US. But if you're calling from another country and it's early and it's morning over there, good morning. Have a great day, great night, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.